Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's writing stream for Sonic Ring Bond, my Sonic the Hedgehog AU story, starring Amy Rose. I'm your host and Ring Bond creator, Joshua Tarwater. I'd like to welcome everyone again to today's stream. As you can see from the get-go, we're going to be diving into some adventures on the Death Egg. Only the 6th scene. And we're going to be going with a different song than the main theme. Good morning to Tiger Rights. Glad you could join me again. Hope you enjoy today's writing. I know you don't usually have the time to sit through the whole stream, but I'll try to do what I can to get everything rolling nicely in a short amount of time. So last time we were smack dab at the beginning of entering the Death Egg, and that's where we're going to step right back into. I will be listening to Shadow Forest. Hey, welcome to the stream, Anna Stick95. Glad to have you. For any new watchers and first-time members of the chat, the Sonic Ring Bond AU is an AU I came up with when I wanted to explore what if, instead of ending up with the Pico Pico Hammer, Amy had ended up with Sonic's moveset. Things have evolved quite a bit since then, and where I'm at with the AU right now is I'm kind of rebuilding Sonic's world. Starting to feel kind of unnecessary with recent events that have spiraled around this week. If anybody saw the Tails Tube thing, they've actually done a slightly better job of explaining the world. But they still, at this point at least, excluded one of the primary features of the games and the IP in general, which is rings, which is one of the things that has heavily shaped my AU, is the ideas and inclusions of rings. Let's see here. If you'd like to listen along to what I'm listening to while I type, since I can't really share it on stream, because I don't have the rights to go ahead and do such, I'll just go ahead and share the link right here to my playlist, and it's the last song on the list. And I am listening to Shadow Forest by Yasunori Mitsuda. And that's going to be off of the Chrono Cross original soundtrack. Nice, moody, atmospheric song for where the scene will be picking up. Typically, my opening paragraphs before I get into it is going to be, let's see here, a setting of the scene. So we'll go ahead and get started on that. Feel free to ask me any questions you may have in the chat. Otherwise, I don't really chat too much during the typing session of the stream. And I will chat more during the second half when I'm going back and proving and talking about the ideas I had and what my intentions were. I also go off on a tangent or two, so. But if you have any questions on Sonic and just want to hear my opinions on it, sometimes they're a bit more insightful because they're areas that I'm really in depth on. Other times they're just really tangential because I have very deep-rooted opinions on some things. Now, if you recall at the start there, I was talking about how I make the rings a more integrated part of the world. Kind of necessary going into this one. Hey, Mecca from the 80s. Really glad to see you. Sorry I forgot to send you the reminder that I was on. Really glad you could make it. And if this is your first time joining me, you're probably not aware that some of the notes that I'm taking on my documents are notes based off the idea of what if I could actually have this as a game. And so I keep track of the notes as I also write the story with the idea of a game structure in mind. And you'll see me mark all those notes as GDN, or Game Document Note. One day I plan on actually putting a Discord together, and all these notes I will be putting into a section within the Discord, as well as line numbers and the sort. Kind of. The general structure I have in mind is pretty much an RPG with a field map, like from the Sonic Chronicles website. I don't know how the actual video game was. And then action stages, which would pretty much just be classic 2D Sonic levels. And you would have plenty of characters to choose between. And so again, that's what you'll see me doing with these notes, is going ahead and writing it all down. Now, I personally lack any game-making skills or knowledge, know-how, or coding. I'm not even a skilled enough and fast enough artist to even provide art for anything. So it's kind of a, I guess, vain ambition, and something that, I kind of like to trick myself into thinking that if I ever get the Discord server going and have all this stuff in there, that somebody would see it all and think to actually make a game from it, which would be pretty cool. Alright, I will. Thanks for stopping by, the Tiger writes. I'll see you next time you can stop by. Hope you have a great day. And there we go. That wraps up Chapter 6. Kind of an odd little scene. Got a chance to squeeze in a fight scene. I'll go ahead and talk about that a bit more after I take a stretch break. Working at a good pace today, which makes me pretty happy. And when I get back from break, we'll go over the individual paragraphs, what my intentions were, and how it fits into the overall shape of the AU on a whole. For now, though, I will go ahead and leave everybody on the break screen with the character slideshow going. Normally these breaks go for about 15 to 30 minutes. I'll try to be quicker though, to not leave everybody waiting too long. Thank you for joining me for the first half of today's writing stream, and I'll be back here in a bit. And a little longer than I planned, but I am back from break now. To those just joining me, welcome to the Sonic Ringbond writing stream. Today's stream is for the second scene inside the Death Egg. This is my Sonic the Hedgehog AU Sonic Ringbond. And so we find ourselves getting right back into the thick of it. For those just joining us, I'm Joshua Tarwater, again the creator of the Sonic Ringbond, Sonic the Hedgehog AU, where eventually it will be exploring a new direction of development for Amy, while focusing on making the rings a primary part of the Sonic the Hedgehog world. Along the way, we'll do such fun little things as just letting the story eventually be a thing which carries itself. We're really still in the beginning stages, and we're building Sonic's world. Right now, a lot of what I'm doing is, again, world building. I'm going to be trying to give a bit of functionality to the Death Egg. Aside from being a space station, it didn't really serve any known purposes in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. Is it a weapons platform? Is it a robot manufacturing plant? What exactly does it do? I will be addressing that in time, but that's going to be more so for tomorrow's scene. For today's scene, we're just getting Sonic and Tails into it, and we're going to start to encounter the first real examples of... Let me see if I can wrap my head around what I'm trying to say. But we're going to be starting to encounter the first examples of what's known as gameplay story dissonance. That may be a little bit of a weird thing to talk about in a written story. If you've been following along, part of my ideas behind how I structure this and the notes that I take while I'm working on it is to build the story so that way it could also be applied to a video game, which in time I'll eventually get a Discord server going. Hopefully it becomes more than just a running joke I say on stream. And I'll put those notes in there in the off hope that somebody reads through them and thinks they can make a game out of it. I'm no game maker myself, but it's an idea to have. Yet in today's in today's scene, and you'll see it being talked about here in the opening paragraph, you'll see that I would take the time to talk about ring shifts, and why ring shifts are an idea and my AU to explain the ever-inconsistent and always-changing world map of the Sonic the Hedgehog games, which it does seem going forward, based off the first episode of Tails Tube, they may just be using the Sonic Unleashed world map going forward. Kind of interesting to see them jumping back to Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Adventure 2, a lot of things that the Adventure and Dark Era fans have been crying about. I'm pretty much amongst those, even though I'm more of a classic fan than an Adventure and Dark Era. But really, the only age of Sonic I haven't really enjoyed has been whatever the last decade was. A lot of people call it the Meta Era, which is an understandable title, because a lot of it is heavily based and referential to what fans are saying at any given time. It also unfortunately comes with writing which makes Sonic more of a stand-up comedian, rather than an in-universe adventurer who's not aware of what's beyond the fourth wall. That's how I write. Sonic doesn't even know the fourth wall exists. He just exists in his world and he's living his life. And so despite changes going on with the franchise itself, in my AU, we're still going to run with the idea that the world map is inconsistent and always changing. This gives rise to the ring shift. Now, the idea to bringing up the ring shift is it's going to be a point of conversation for Sonic and Tails within this scene. And it's supposed to help explain the oddity of why the condition of the Death Egg is what it is, while simultaneously presenting that it may not be this feature that's regular for my AU, but hasn't even been properly established yet. Arguably, it's a pacing problem story-wise. but it's something that my story requires. Where the dissonance in my story comes from is, in regards to gameplay, is right now Sonic and Tails, the narrative requires them to talk about, is the condition of the Death Egg a result of a ring shift or something else? That's the story requirement. The gameplay requirements, however, requires introducing the ideas of field map task and side quest, battle on the field map, and engaging with the field map of the general game idea that I have. And so, I need to take the time to let the story engage itself, talking about the potential of a ring shift, hence why it's introduced here, but the narrative also has to squeeze in a fight so that way it covers and addresses the gameplay needs of the narrative. It's a bit offsetting, and that, for those who are just joining us in the second half, is what we'll be doing throughout the second half of my writing streams, not just this one, but all my writing streams, is I'll go back over the scene and talk about what my goals were for this scene, what I was thinking about, what I was attempting to do with the scene. And so today we're going to be looking at trying to balance that dissonance, and also bringing to fore ideas for my AU. And so first thing we have up is going to be the ring shift, which I pretty much just covered. If we read along through the highlighted area, I give an explanation for why rings can be one place one day and then they're not the next day, and generally the ideas behind how a ring shift works. And I'm also starting to build the idea of what to expect from adventurers, that there's more than just Sonic. These are building ideas, and so even though I have the gameplay side going, I am still world building and trying to establish what to expect in the world as we move out of this part of the story with Sonic. And so with that done, we move down into the main bulk of this scene. Quick and easy, some of the easiest descriptions I've written for a while. These little quick sentences, sometimes a little longer than I'd like them to do, they're just my basic things going. Quick description, the reader's imagination will fill in what it means. Another quick description, another quick description, another quick description. It's just hit, 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 hit. And without you even trying, your subconscious mind should create a picture that allows you to see the environment. Probably the easiest way I would describe this environment for the casual viewer is take Aquatic Ruin from Sonic 2, or Sylvania Castle from Sonic 4 if that's your preference, and then take the Death Egg from Sonic and Knuckles and mash them together into a single zone. And specifically Act 1 of the Death Egg. You could mix it with Act 1, but then you gotta kind of split the level like Marble Zone, where the upper half is above ground, the lower half is underground. Though that's not necessarily a bad thing either, but really just a matter of how you want to go about looking at it. But this was a pretty easy and quick description in that regard, and one of the reasons I used this form, aside from my own personal inspirations, which I've talked about in prior streams, if you're familiar with Ikuhara Sensei and works like Muwado Penguin Drum, Son Manzai, I forgot the title on that one, right? Revolutionary Girl Utena, Yurikuma Arashi. He's a big inspiration for what leads me describing scenes like this. But also the other idea is it saves words and lets the reader's mind fill it in. And it also allows me to avoid relying on my readers having intimate knowledge of all the Sonic the Hedgehog games and zones. And so, as such, when I talk about the Death Egg Zone and what acts an Aquatic Ruin Zone, for some of my readers, that is all a toss your hands up in the air. I have no clue what's being talked about. And suffice to say, that's a little unfair. So, instead of asking that of my readers, I will instead provide descriptions which, for the most part, should cover that. Let's see here. So, even though I do descriptions like that, I then still get into more detailed descriptions as I describe the moving of the narrative. And so now that the scene is set, the narrative is now moving. And with the narrative moving, it's now necessary to go a little bit more into detail on the descriptions. And so that's why you'll even get the idea that there's clouds inside of this huge cavernous space. It is literally a planet within a planet. And it's, in my mind at least, a pretty cool scene. A little bleak and detailless, but I'm certain a really good concept artist could really take the descriptions here and really give it life. And honestly, I'm going to give everybody a chance to do so. Starting with this zone, I'll be setting it up soon enough. I will be hosting contests on Twitter. Just look for Sonic_Ring_Bond at twitter.com. And you'll find the Sonic Ring Bond official Twitter account. And it will eventually be hosting a contest. When it gets to hosting that contest, that first contest is going to ask people to go ahead and read through, which is kind of hard to do since you'll have to watch the streams to read the story, but it'll ask everyone to go through the episodes of New History chapters and pick their favorite scene and draw a black and white picture for it. And literally just black and white. Color black, color white, and your line work. It doesn't really need to be more than that. And I was thinking originally of a $50 prize, but I really want people to feel like it's worth their time, so I will probably double that when I get to announcing the first contest. For the moment, though, have a bit of stuff going on. Pretty much like manga, though it doesn't necessarily need to be that detailed. If you've been on my Twitter account, I do have a image as an example already. I can drop it into the stream real quick, just to give people an idea. Let's see here. Give me just a second and I'll drop it in. There we go. This is about all that I would be asking for. You can go as little detail or as much detail that you want, whatever you feel is you want to put out for a chance to win $100. And your work will then be published alongside my story. About the only thing I will ask for you aside from that, it's pretty much a willingness to give up all rights to the art, not to me, but to Sega Sammy Holdings. Because for me, anything I publish for Sonic Ring Bond, I do consider all rights sacrificed to Sega Sammy Holdings. So, that is for the most part going on. And so that'd be about the only additional requirement I would ask for people. And that's one of the reasons I would like to elevate it from 50 up to 100, because asking people to turn their rights over to Sega seems a bit much. But for the most part, it would just be in the contest rules, because it's a very unlikely chance that Sega will ever actually realize that I consider everything Sonic Ringbond unregistered copyright of Sega Sammy Holdings. I could be wrong. One day it may be big enough and they poke their nose over to go, why are people talking about this? And then see they own it. And then they'll probably get mad at me for all the content I've created for it without them making a single penny off of it. But we'll see where it goes. Back into the story proper, though. One of the things I'm still working with, I hope to eventually phase it out. It just seems a little weird right now not to. But it's the idea that pretty much, and it doesn't just have to be from episode 5. Generally, it can be from episode 3 on, since I already have a picture for episode 2. It's just whatever scene tickled your fancy. The only thing is that typically the turn-in date would be before the chapter publishes. Like, this chapter will publish a month from now, and so if I was to announce the chapter today, anybody whose favorite scene is in this would have the benefit of being able to wait it out. It's why I haven't quite started doing chapters yet, because I'm unsure of how I want to go ahead and balance that. Because if somebody's favorite scene were to, say, be one from when I introduced the contest that's premiering a lot shorter, it could very well be problematic. Because then they would have significantly less time, and how do I make a deadline for that? Especially since it's going to be based entirely off which is pretty much my favorite drawing. It may honestly be better to do it one zone at a time, or as a once a month thing. It's kind of a little tricky right now, so I'll see if I make up my mind on it or not. For the first time I do it, I may let it be retroactive and I'll just update old posts to include the art. But we'll see. Once more, though, on the story proper, what we'll see going on here is I'm continuing to establish the idea that Sonic has memories from literally all the games. If the game has taken place at some point, at least between Sonic 2, well, between the end of Sonic 2, and I'm going to say Sonic Generations, just because Sonic Generations breaks up the flow of time and history anyways. And so, between that point, and likely past it too, Sonic will have memories of it. And part of the reason I can get away with that is Sega's preference for maintaining the static quo, not because Sonic would necessarily benefit from growing as a character, but by being a character with a static arc, they're able to continuously use him the same way, which allows them to create even more characters, which allows for more merchandise and more money. And so, as such, one of the things that's happening in Sonic Ringbond is because Sonic remembers all this stuff, he's looking at certain events which would otherwise be familiar, such as here, and having it start to break apart. Meanwhile, while I'm also covering Sonic's development in Ringbond, I'm also using Tails, good old exposition dump Tails, to bring in the ideas of how Eggman interacts with the world, and also how a Ringbond can change the world from what you're used to it being. And so, even though there's still time for Sonic to joke, this is a matter of him joking to try to keep himself calm. He's uneasy. And so, as we go into the next paragraph, I again go into details on the ideas of Sonic's memory, and how what he expects to know, it's not the truth anymore. And Sonic is a character with a static character arc, which means he doesn't change. He's a character who already has his truth and lives by it. Rather, he's designed in such a way that other characters are affected by him and his truth. And that's one of the reasons why, storytelling wise, Sonic's not really a great character to tell stories from the viewpoint of, because then it becomes very obvious that there's no growth in his character, and you're having to look outside of Sonic to see growth. And so it's usually better not to tell stories from his viewpoint, even if the majority of gameplay should be controlling him. It's a very precarious balance, and it's going to be an interesting challenge for me, being the amateur writer that I am. But for the most part, I'll just focus on keeping Sonic as close to in character as I know him to be. And I will then constantly make sure I'm focusing on the world around him. It's one of the benefits of using Amy as my main character, specifically in my AU version of her, Rosie, is why, like Sonic, I'm going to be looking to go into a static arc and to lock her down as this is who Amy is, which how I view Amy is very different from most people, hence why Rosie exists at all. If no one's familiar with my AU version of Amy or Rosie, if you were here for the beginning of the stream, or came in during the break, or even if you're just scrolling through, you'll see here in those break images that little animation. That's my version of Amy, otherwise known as Rosie. And the idea behind her is, what if she had Sonic's moveset and had gotten that before getting the Pico Pico Hammer? For the AU story that I'm telling, amnesia is also a very necessary part for her character, so it's easier for an audience to come in who's not familiar with it and go, oh, okay, unlike Sonic, who's bothered by who he was, Amy pretty much doesn't have a clue. And so she just keeps on being Amy regardless with that, and so things that are familiar, they don't matter as much, but through Sonic, the rest of the IP is still recognized. And there's going to be a lot more characters than just Sonic and Amy and Tails. I do plan on drawing from all over the place. One of the early major storylines where I'll be introducing Eggman to other people to fight aside from Sonic. I actually plan on doing my own take on Bunny Rabbit from the Archie comics, or more accurately, from the Saturday morning cartoon. I shouldn't spoil things too much, but she's a character I've been kind of wanting to see how I can make her work in Sonic's world, because a lot of who she is dependent on extraordinarily non-game elements, yet simultaneously a disdain for Eggman personally because of what happened to her. And so it becomes a question of how can I balance it? And so it will be an interesting challenge, especially since I've never really read the Archie comics, and I haven't watched that since I was a kid, and they bait and switched me. Instead of giving me Metal Sonic like I wanted, they gave me Uncle Chuck as a Robian. Suffice to say, that was enough to finally draw a line in the sand for Kid Me. I was already bothered by the fact that the two cartoons at the time did not match the games at all, and I loathed how Robotnik looked. Because even back then, in the early 90s, I knew he was Eggman. It's amazing what happens when you have information. Not for sure how I had it, but my dad did get Sega Visions magazines, which did generally share a lot of interesting information. And so the Sally Acorn name swap on Amy at the CD instruction manual didn't fool me, because I knew she was actually Amy Rose, or Rosie the Rascal. I knew that in 1993. And it's just, sometimes it's mind-boggling the fact that I knew it without ever following the Archie comics. Because from what I can tell, a lot of people were reasonably duped. And to them, Sonic is the Archie comics. And there's nothing wrong with that being their version of Sonic, but to take their version of Sonic and expect a different medium, the games, and the source material, to match what they were wrongly given for the sole purpose of marketing, you can't blame them for wanting it because it's what they were sold, but they were sold a lie to begin with, and that was unfair to them, and I'm honestly surprised Sega of America has never been sued for false advertising. They could very easily have been for the Archie comics. That's how off it was. And some people may argue that there wasn't anything to work with. Far from true. There was tons of content to work with. It's just for whatever reason, Sega of America either didn't give it to Sega of America, either Sega of America didn't get it from Sega of Japan, or Sega of America rejected it. Sorry for that little interruption. Despite the time of morning, there are still people up at home. Yep, I do remember that. But if you go back even further on Eggman, you can get all the way to the point that he was the protagonist of the series. And so yeah, there are a lot of changes from the Japanese side, but there's still a lot of stuff in that early stuff which still fits who the characters are, such as Eggman not thinking about the consequences of his actions on others, and his overall showmanship personality. These are all things that have stuck around. But yeah, there was a lot on the Japanese side that didn't make it to the American side, and the majority of the American side stuff didn't make it to Japan. And so you have the Japanese creators not communicating with the people who can communicate with their audience, and the people who can communicate with their audience selling their audience a completely different product than what they're selling. And it came to a head when Sonic Adventure came out, because now you actually had story into games. And Sega of Japan, wanting to push that story, cracked down. But not too much. And what I mean by not too much is, to their viewpoint, the Archie comics were nothing more but an advertisement. And they didn't pay any attention beyond that. So all they told Sega of America is you gotta update all the designs to match the new designs. That's all, and they left it at that. It ended up being one of the instances which really defamed Amy's character, as well as Sega of America's less than flattering localization, which completely ignored the Japanese context. And yet, the important part is now that there was actually a story happening in the games, no mention of the Kingdom of Acorn, no mention of Robotnik beyond the most fan servicey of moments. He's Eggman. And fans of the American canon were for the first time introduced to, why still localized, the Japanese canon. And they had no idea what they were looking at. They wanted to know, where were the freedom fighters? Why isn't Sally here with Sonic? Why isn't the world totally conquered by Eggman? And the Archie comics got into all sorts of weird ways of trying to explain the idea of overworlders, this group, that group, because everything they had written up to that point got thrown out as they were finally starting to be exposed to what Yuji Naka and company had always been working on. And suffice to say, it was a turbulent time. And the worst part is, because Sega of America only used Amy because she was the main character of the games, and thus she has to be part of the advertisement, they defamed her everywhere. If you take the Sonic Advance games, the US is the only version of those games where she's not on the back cover. I don't even think she's on the front cover for the first one. And it happens a lot. Lots and lots and lots and lots of things. And bad localization, purposely cutting out scenes from Sonic X, and just general American culture resulted in a lot of hate for Amy's character, and a massive amount of misunderstanding. And the biggest thing that's missed from the American side is the idea that Sonic runs from Amy, not because he hates her guts and can't stand her advances, but because he does like her, but he's so immature at those matters that he completely loses his composure and just bolts. It's a bit, how should we say, frustrating as an Amy fan and as a Sonic fan to see both of their characters twisted just so Sega of America at the time could continue to push Sally Acorn when she really had no place in the franchise at that point anymore. And it's a little messed up because there is really no good way to phase her out of the franchise. If you go by how Ken Penders wanted to do it in his Endgame comic at issue 50, he just wanted to kill her. And that's because his personal opinion, as a character, she cramped Sonic's style. And he's not wrong. Sonic is a drifting adventurer. He drifts from one adventure to the next wherever the wind is blowing. Staying still, serving a kingdom, and as a soldier who supports the crown is so against who Sonic is, it's so against his philosophies, and yet people clung to that fantasy and believed that Sonic would willingly give up everything he is for Sally. The problem is in turn, Sally was never presented as willing to do the same for Sonic. You never see her willing to give up her entire kingdom so she can travel with him. Instead, she just tells him to slow down. She demands of him, demands of him, demands of him. And even if you go with Penders' 25 years later storyline, Sonic is king instead of Prince Consort, with Sally as queen. Which is not how royalty in any part of the world works. Sonic is not born royalty in the Archie comics. He is a commoner who marries into royalty, and thus he cannot be king. But yet, Sally twisted everyone for it, and now Sonic is literally stuck in a position of authority and oppression, and a people held to his desires of power, which are not even his desires, they're desires that Sally tells him to have. It is such a huge betrayal of who Sonic is. It's absurd. And a lot of people would say, well, Amy's not any better. And I'm not saying Amy's better. However, Amy is different from Sally. Sally was created as a character to provide the viewpoint of the small animals being captured by Eggman. That's literally what she exists for, is to show the harm Eggman does through his actions. Amy as a character is a character created to be Sonic's girlfriend. And as his girlfriend, she has to be able to live his lifestyle and enjoy it. And that is literally how her entire character, early on at least, was shaped. As you can see from my AU and Totally Changing Amy, I am more fond of the ideas of who and what she was before the whole maturing, leadership, team leader, the whole career superhero bit applied to the characters, instead of them just being adventurers who help out the people they meet along the way. And a lot of it is because Sonic works better episodically than he does as a serial. which is funny because I'm effectively writing an episodic serial. And right now, the chapters that I'm working on, or episode, is Episode of New History. And the idea behind this is to establish that the history of the games, the comics, the TV shows, the movies, none of it matters here. It matters to Sonic because he knows it, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Everything's different. And I will get to why it's different in future episodes. But when I finish establishing that everything is different, I will be switching over to be less so following Sonic, and it'll be more of a balance of storytelling to where you have Sonic, Amy, and an OC for my AU, who will be the main characters. In a way, I don't really know the best trio to use as an example for how they overall work. I would probably say to look at. Oh, sheesh, what are their names? I suddenly can't remember their names. Oh, that's really bad. But the three main characters of Mowalu Penguin Drum. I remember Shota, remember Himari, can't remember the last one, and I just had all their names on my tongue the other day. If you'll excuse me a moment as I entertain the idea of looking up who they are all. Sorry, it's Shoma and Kamba. Kamba, Shoma, and Himari. And that should, for the most part, be more of the relationship and nature that one would expect from Sonic, Rosie, and the OC, who hasn't been introduced in universe yet. And that might even give you some ideas to some of the stuff that I have going on in the story to consider that relationship. But for the most part, it will create a antagonistic edge between Sonic and the OC. But the one thing that they will agree on will be Amy's well-being. This is a Son Amy AU, so don't be surprised by that. Back into the current point of the story, though. Do give a bit of a reference to Knuckles and who he is, and how he would have actually been a help to Sonic at this point of the story, but the nature of events kind of got him booted from things going on. And so we create this, I create this uneasiness in Sonic, this discomfort, this irritability. He's not in a good mood. And, he'll be kind of reflected here in this part here. From there, you'll see my fancy little notes cropping up again, telling us what to expect and what's going on. And all that's really doing at this point of the story is telling me that the cutscene for going into the Death Egg's over, and now it's time for the field tutorial for combat on the field. Again, that is on the game development side. Will it ever become a game? Who knows? I have no idea. I would just like to one day see my Sonic Ringbond server at over 1,000 followers and have people regularly commenting on my stories and popping into these streams. That would make me happy as can be. I mean, honestly, my ultimate pipe dream would just be for Sega to adapt it into official canon. But let's keep fantasy to the side for now and focus on what we have in front of us. And one of the things I want to try to make sure I don't do too often is informal writing, outside of character speech, so I need to make sure I catch those little things. And so this paragraph I just took a moment to read. Again, it's talking about the change and how weird the current situation is, such as grass rooting itself directly into metal. That's not natural. And so, normally Sonic seeing Eggman stuff losing to nature would be something that would make him smile. Here, it's not right. And it's bothering him. But Sonic is a character who, unless he's angered, or is pushed into a point where he has to be serious, he will usually quip crack-wise and be a very irreverent individual. He's supposed to do so in a charming way. But sometimes that presentation comes off as obnoxious. And now, as I said before, so up to this point, talking about the ring shift, talking about there's a lot going on at this scene, really. And so now we move into the action. And you'll see that shift I was talking about starting up. And as we break into the action, and I show Sonic has no problem pushing his friends out of the way in rather violent ways. It gets them out of the way, and it's fast, it's immediate, he knows they're safe, and he's able to move at the same time. Tails will probably have a stomach ache later, but I'll just convince him to eat more mint candy. We know he can be pretty bad about that. Especially if the Sonic takeovers are anything to go by. But one of the things that I want to get into is that because this is just after Sonic 2, when Sonic 3 should be starting actually, that Tails does not have the confidence. He is anxious in a combat situation. He's unsure. He can trust in Sonic, but he cannot guarantee what's going to happen or why. And now at this point, I get to introduce one of my favorite little types of enemies, my Anchorman Ghost. Anyone who's followed any of my prior work with the AU ideas, this is all pretty much a big reset. You can still go straight into this from that old work, but the old work isn't necessary to follow for this work. But the Anchorman golems are just kind of my general go-to enemy type. They're a nice basic. You see them, they have multiple attack types, and they're going to make you think about how you approach them. But you also want to approach them quickly, so that way you can break them in a hurry. Now, to my knowledge, ghosts are one of the things that can make Tails kind of uncomfortable, hence the stutter. And so a lot of that is Tails, as I want to bring that lack of confidence back to the fore of his character, so that way he has a character and isn't just an exposition dumper. It gives something to bounce off of with him, things to think about and consider how they can shape a scene. What does Tails contribute to the scene versus is there time for Tails to talk about the scene? And he'll get a chance, because one of the things I'm adding into Tails, and it's kind of coming from Boom, is his tendency to talk on about things that catches his attention, from his own machines to Eggman's, and even to these golems eventually. I feel like I can spell beam a different way, though. No, I was right. That is wrong. And this little bit of action here is mostly just demonstrating that the golems are dangerous, showing rings working, and showing Sonic getting out of the way of the attack. Now, this scene right here, this part right here, that I want to kind of cover is the idea that, well, it's something which I can cover on the gameplay side, is a lot of people like to see Tails be the brain of the operation, despite the fact that Sonic was a world-famous adventurer and beat Eggman on several occasions before he ever met him. And so the idea here is Tails has an idea, but Sonic is smart enough to figure it out on his own. But because he believes that they have the same idea, and Tails is the type of character who idolizes Sonic and attempts to copy him, it allows Sonic to put trust in Tails that Tails will understand what he's thinking about and be able to act on it. And so as we move from that, we get a little tag team moment where you get to see Sonic and Tails literally bounce off each other and do a team attack, which allows them to beat the Golem. It's a bit overkill, especially since it was the story progresses, the two of them should be able to trash golems on their own just fine. But narratively, it's a good opportunity to show that Sonic is thinking ahead of Tails, but Tails is still able to act because there is a bond between the two of them. Just the way the two connect and sync with each other. And it is kind of funny. It's a Son Amy AU, and I've just finished writing chapter 6, and Amy's still barely into the story, and here I am showing Sonic and Tails on an adventure. Almost hard to believe this early in the story. It's going to be interesting much later on when it's obvious that Amy's one of the main characters. And I get to introduce the idea of my flowers of light, which I call light blooms. Those are names which would be introduced later, and it's going to be a bit more interesting to say the least. And that's all going to start later on down the road. But for right now, it's more important to pay attention to the fact that Sonic is cautious. He's reckless but also cautious. If he sees a cliff and he sees a couple of stone fingers sticking out of the ground that he can jump off of to scale the cliff, he'll do it. That's his recklessness. But his recklessness comes from the fact that he does have a knowledge of how it works. And because he has that knowledge of how it works, he can be reckless. But here, he knows nothing about what's going on, and it creates a certain cautiousness that goes against how he's presented in Sonic Lost World, to where he just acts because he can act because he's fast, so he should be fast. And that's a very shallow understanding of Sonic's speed. Sonic has a lot of trust in his speed and a lot of pride in his speed, but his recklessness is not born from his speed so much as it is that because he has control over his speed, he's confident. And so then as I introduced the Light Bloom, yet another thing I'm introducing in this chapter, lots and lots and lots of concepts. And it's part of what I mean by world building. I've introduced the idea of ring shifts, and now I said this likely isn't a ring shift, but it's still being weird and taking over one, like one. In fact, it's actually at this point where Sonic finally gets to say he doesn't think it's a ring shift. And so you now get this argument between Sonic and Tails on what could cause this. I'm just throwing yet another mystery out there. There's a lot of things that I want floating around in my readers' brains in regards to the story. And so as I move along and how the two of them finish their argument, it's not a heated debate about who's right or who's wrong. It's more a matter of Sonic has an instinct for the rings, and he understands how nature works, how rings shifts work, and this situation's just wrong to him. But as we get past that, because it's not harsh, then it allows Tails to take the time to share his own thoughts, talk about what's on his mind, and show how he thinks himself. And so Tails is pretty good at throwing various ideas out there. If I ever show how these golems come to be, I'll probably disappoint poor Tails, but it was a chance to let him be a little nerdy and share a bit of his thought process and just keep it going. And again, a bit of that joking from Sonic as we get to this point, but also acknowledging of the threat. And so that's one of the things that Sonic and Amy are both meant to do, is to keep people's spirits up. Amy does it by encouragement, Sonic does it by downplaying. But he downplays without removing the seriousness. And that's an interesting way to keep it going. It is an interesting contrast between him and Amy. And this little bit of things, just again, a quick little note, taking the moment to go. Okay, we're on a Sonic level. There should be rings about. I hadn't mentioned them up to this point of the story, and so I just wanted to make sure I squeeze in a mention to go, yes, they're here. I do not want to leave them out, and so this was the opportunity to do so. And now we get back as we come to the end of this, the whole reason they're here. And I had contemplated really compressing this part to have them come in, fight a golem, go through a bunch of other golems, get to the control room, and do the control room scene all in a single scene. But that's a tremendous amount of content, and it goes against my idea of having one event per scene. And so, what probably won't have content, except purely from a gameplay side, should it ever become a game, is traversing from this first fight to the control room. That will not be covered in the story, beyond maybe a quick mention. And so, you're now going to see as I build to that, the idea that Sonic gives the lead to Tails. Primarily because Tails knows what he needs to do. And gameplay-wise, that's an opportunity to go, oh, Sonic's mentioned this, we can now squeeze in a tutorial for character switching. And so I can actually go ahead and drop a note in here on that. And just little things to know what I'm up to and why I'm up to it. And then I can do the same thing here, as I was mentioning back during the writing part. And introduce the idea of the field task tutorial. So lots of different ideas, lots of different things. This is all shaping how I tell the story. And so while there's this huge heap of gameplay that could be here, it's what I was talking about at the beginning of this section about the dissonance between gameplay and story is the gameplay side needs to teach you how to play the game. But the story side needs to focus on why Sonic and Tails are here and world building so the story has a firm foundation for the audience to know what to expect from it. It is, in a way, probably a little more complicated than most people would think it needs to be. But on a whole, I think it will help me keep things structured and also help me as a storyteller learn why certain things work and don't work within video games stories. And so now as we get to the end of all this, you get to see Sonic hand everything off over to Tails. And also pretty much back to the player, hence the notes there. And then with this final paragraph, just wrapping up the ideas of the scene. while also, again, choosing the direction of where things are going to go with this rapid paragraph. And that's pretty much what they do, is it recaps what the idea of the scene was and set up where the next scene is going to be. And with that, we reach the end of the scene, and I can run back and run my editor. And at this point of the scene, I usually openly invite any further questions. Long-time viewers or into future readers, this would be the best time to ask anything that you've seen or that you have questions about. For first-timers, feel free to throw in any questions that you have. I'm always happy to answer. And it usually keeps the stream going just a little longer than when I run my check, which isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Let's see. And that was a silly little error on my part. And the editor really doesn't like a lot of stuff that I do with my stylistic writing. And this is when I should probably just put a comma here. It'll help break up the sentence. Though it still doesn't like it. And unfortunately, this thinks I'm writing an essay, but I just want this to be a very simple read, so that way people don't spend a lot of energy on it. And with that, we reach the end of this scene. And reaching the end of the scene, means I gotta go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you very much for joining me, everyone. I will see you all hopefully tomorrow morning, same time as today. Look forward to going into the control room and setting up what happens next. For the length of this chapter, I would probably say that we're a little around, maybe halfway. We'll see how it goes yet. For now, though, thank you very much, everyone, for stopping in and joining the stream. I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, stay well.